And with that, good evening, everyone. My name is Veronica Belenkin, and I'm the Consumer Health Librarian at Greenwich Hospital, and welcome to another webinar hosted by the Greenwich Hospital Medical Library. And tonight's webinar is on the topic of food safety. It is, in fact, Food Safety Education Month. That is what one of the many awarenesses that is in September. And I figured that this was a very important webinar to have because one of the consequences of the pandemic was that a lot of people are getting into cooking at home, or they're getting into delivery or delivery options such as subscription boxes as a way to avoid having to go out, or, when it comes to locking down or in quarantine, those are really your only two options. So in that case, it is even more important to just get an overview of what food safety facts and tips you should be aware of, and how to avoid getting food poisoning, which can be very severe in certain cases. And I'm very happy and lucky to have Dr. Tushar Stramanka, a resident physician at Greenwich Hospital, joining me today. Thank you so much, Dr. Stramanka.
Thank you, Veronica, for having me.
And he specializes in gastroenterology, so he'll be able to guide us through the nuances of food safety. He has a lot of great expertise in that subject area, particularly in gastroenteritis, also known as stomach flu. And just so you are aware, we will be having some interactive portions of this PowerPoint. So that'll be indicated on the slide as question for the audience. I like to keep my webinars less like lectures and more like, discussions between myself and the audience. So feel free to interact and get engaged with whatever questions we ask. It helps us know what the audience already knows and helps us know what to go into detail with in the future slides that we have tonight. And one more thing, we will be having a Q&A session at the end of the webinar for anybody who still has questions for myself or Dr. Stramanka on the topic we are discussing tonight. Please save your questions for the end of the PowerPoint. And you'll be able to either answer in the chat box on your Zoom screen or in the Q&A box on the end of your Zoom screen. So with that, I will go into the introduction portion, because I think we want you to know who is speaking and why you should listen to us. So about myself, like I said, I'm the Consumer Health Librarian at Greenwich Hospital. I've been working here for 2 years, almost 3 in March. Time flies. So if you don't know what a Consumer Health Librarian is, it's someone who is specialized in finding, evaluating, and sharing information. And in my case, it's health information. And I have a master's in library science from Queens College, and I possess a consumer health certification. Now, while this means that I don't have clinical expertise on the subjects, I am very good at researching these, especially when it comes to the online space. My slogan is, if I don't know, but I will find out. So that is basically what you come to me for. I offer a service where if you find research frustrating, specifically for health information, if you don't know where to start, or you don't want to search through billions and billions of Google results, but you do want to find out more about a diagnosis, an upcoming surgery, any kind of medication, or just anything in general about nutrition, health, or fitness, you can come to me. We can schedule an appointment either by email or Zoom, and I'll be able to research that for you and get you that information in a timely manner. I do this for 2 reasons, because I want to make sure that the residents of Greenwich and its surrounding communities are better informed patients and can make better healthcare decisions, and because I'm a Greenwich resident myself and I do care about this community as I am a part of it. So I will move forward with Dr. Stramanka. Please, Dr. Stramanka, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. So I'm Dr. Stramanka. I was working in the UK up until recently. I graduated medical school in 2014 from University College London, and worked as a physician in the UK for about 5 years, and started my training in gastroenterology before I came to the States about 2 years ago. And then I started doing internal medicine residency at Greenwich Hospital. I learned about the webinars from Veronica and Dr. Mard, who's one of the physicians at Greenwich Hospital, and I thought it was a fantastic way to engage with the community about a very important topic. So thank you for having me here.
Thank you for participating. I really appreciate it. Just as an interesting side note, what made you interested in gastroenterology as a specialty?
Um, I think for me, it was the most mixed and varied of the specialties that were related to internal medicine. Like had everything relating to cancers, to parasitic infections and tropical diseases and autoimmune pathologies. It was such a wide variety, and with a mixture of a procedural aspect as well, like doing endoscopy. So the combination of things was what suited me.
Yeah, it seems like you'd be a jack of all trades in that sense, so that's great. All right, we will continue to our overview of what to expect during this PowerPoint presentation, and Dr. Stramanka will jump in on each slide to give his expertise on each subject. We already went over the introductions. We're going to be going over, as our first slide, common foodborne pathogens, which is also the cause of most of the foodborne illnesses that we are familiar with. We'll move on from there to the common food safety mistakes that we often make while cooking at the home. The CDC, or the Centers for Disease Control, outlined 4 steps to food safety, which we'll be going over briefly. Then we'll give out some food safety tips for dining out, traveling, or ordering delivery. We will, with Dr. Stramanka here, he can help us with recognizing the symptoms of food poisoning. There's a level. There can be, less severe and very severe, and he is specifically well known in gastroenteritis. When it comes to the less severe, we will give you an in-depth details on how to manage food poisoning from home. And for those of you who are tired of webinars, we will be offering a 5-minute intermission and Zoom break at that point once we go over those prior subjects. So as you can avert your gaze from the screen, you can stretch, get a drink of water, use the restroom. So we're offering that for ourselves and the audience tonight. And lastly, we will end the evening with me sharing some online resources for further education on this topic, some book recommendations, and we'll finish our session with a Q&A for anyone in the audience who still has questions. So that is the basic overview of our presentation. And with that, we shall officially get started with a question from the audience. I bet you guys didn't expect that right away. So I want to get a sense of what you have for the following question. You may answer this question in the 2 ways. You can answer in the Zoom chat when you go to your dashboard and go to chat, or you can add a Post-it note in a software known as Padlet. And the question is, what types of foods are most likely to cause food poisoning? So this question may be from your own personal experience. You may have had food poisoning at some point in your life and you know the cause of it. Or you can just know based on, cultural osmosis, what is most common. So for those who are feeling more comfortable answering in the chat, do so right now. I will bring up the Padlet right now so that you can get a chance to try that out. So this is what the Padlet looks like. I'm going to share the link to it right now in the Zoom chat box. So to everyone, okay. So that's the link for it. The way that this works is that you can click on the plus sign at the bottom of the screen, and you can just write down what the answer to the question is. Write some examples of food that are most often recalled or linked to food poisoning. So I'm going to put down sushi, because I've had good and bad sushi. So that's what it's going to look like. That's my Post-it note. So if anybody wants to try that out, you can click on the plus sign below, or you can answer in the Zoom chat, like I said. So I'm going to give you just a minute or 2 to do that. Guess I can make this a little bit prettier. You can bold it. You can make it a different color. Whatever you wish to do. If anybody doesn't want to give it a try, I understand it's a new thing, but all you have to do is just click the link in the chat that I just posted, and then you just press the plus sign. Or like you said, if that's too complicated, you can just answer in the bottom of the Zoom chat. And we see we've had about 6 new attendees, so thank you so much for joining us. If you're just joining us, we're doing an interactive portion. If you want to just answer the question here, it's what are some foods that cause food poisoning? Like I said, my example was sushi. I know that to be the case from prior experience, and it was not great.
Experience is a hard teacher.
Yeah, I know. Dr. Stramanka, while we're on the subject of the question, do you have an answer for this?
I do. Should I put them somewhere?
Yeah, you can either answer in the Zoom chat or use the Padlet link in here. Oh, somebody posted undercooked food. Okay, good. Yeah, that's actually what we'll be going over. So you're kind of ahead of the game on this webinar. Yeah, undercooked potato salads. Oh boy. It's probably those ones that were left out in the sun at a buffet, huh?
That's right. It's why you don't turn up late to a barbecue.
Yep. Yeah, I feel like most people are susceptible to that, especially because, you know, I feel like that's the number one thing you're expected to bring at those kind of outdoor events, but, you know, to the detriment of everyone who tries it, unfortunately. So we're gonna just continue. Thank you for those who posted in the chat. No problem if you didn't get a chance to post, it's fine. But undercooked food, sushi, and potato salad, those are great answers. And we're gonna be going over the rest of the foods right now. So the ones that people most often overlook sometimes are fruits and veggies, but everybody probably knows that you got to wash them. We also have raw meat, and most seafoods like mollusks, shrimp, the oysters especially. We also have flour in the mix as something that can cause food poisoning, as stuff like eggs, and dairy, and something that some of you might remember, I'm not sure if Dr. Stramanka does, but something called raw milk. There used to be a fad a few years ago. I think it was even mentioned in the Food Incorporated documentary that was big a few years ago, that people were literally drinking raw milk straight from the cow as opposed to the processed part. Do you have any comments on raw milk, Dr. Stramanka, and why that might not be a good idea?
I mean, it used to be a global issue, and then we sort of moved away from drinking raw milk to pasteurizing milk, whereas where we heat the milk up to about 121 degrees Celsius. You're going to have to convert that to Fahrenheit for me. But essentially, that would kill most of the bacteria that would be harmful pathogens that could infect you.
Yes. So speaking of pathogens and bacteria, that is what our next slide is about. And as you can see from the picture right here, this is from a 2018 study of foodborne diseases, outbreaks, and ongoing public health problem. And the biggest category in this pie chart is land animals. They cause 44% of foodborne disease outbreaks. The most common of that section being Salmonella, Campylobacter, Listeria, and monocytogenes, but the rest are from aquatic animals, plants, and other. And other refers to, you know, parasites. I'm going to just bring up the definition of pathogens for those who may not know. It is a bacterium, virus, or other microorganism that can cause disease. When 2 or more people get the same illness from the same food or drink, it is considered a foodborne disease outbreak. So when you hear on the news, there's an outbreak, it could be in multiple states, it can be in one state, but it can be that small, that seemingly insignificant number of 2 or more people. So because people take this very seriously and they really don't want this to spread. I'm gonna let Dr. Stramanka take over for the rest of the slide and going over the various types of pathogens. So take it away.
So as you said, a pathogen is any sort of disease-causing organism. And when we talk about foodborne diseases, what we tend to be thinking about is food poisoning or stomach flu, or as we like to say, gastroenteritis. And what gastroenteritis means, if I can break it down, the term gastro relates to the stomach, the entero part refers to the bowels, and the itis at the end means inflammation. So all gastroenteritis is an inflammation of the stomach and the lining of the bowels. And this can cause a spectrum of problems for people. If they're lucky, you'll have that inflammation causes loose stools because the bowel is no longer able to resorb water or nutrients, and so it just simply empties. But those who are less lucky can get bloody diarrhea. They can have fevers. They can become very systemically unwell from it, very dehydrated from the loss of fluids and electrolytes. So these are some of the common organisms that can cause gastroenteritis. And I have to say, when we talk about gastroenteritis, about 90% of them are a viral cause, of which half of which is usually norovirus. But these are other causes that we need to be aware of. So from the bacteria side, we have E. coli and Salmonella, and we see occasional epidemics of these. They are often organisms that you find in the soil, but through cross-contamination or handling of cattle or livestock, it can spread to other food substances. Listeria, we tend to see a lot more in soft cheeses and unpasteurized dairy products. And one of the issues with this is, for a lot of people, it may not affect them, but for pregnant women, for people over the age of 65, or people who have dampened immune systems, they're more likely to be affected by listeria infections. Campylobacter, as a textbook answer, we tend to see this more in people that have had undercooked chicken. And one of the scary things about this bacteria is, for some people, the inflammation can also cause other problems. They can develop a neurological issue where they develop an ascending paralysis of the body. From the viruses, which I said would be most common, norovirus accounts for about 50% of it, but hepatitis A we tend to find from time to time. And, there was an epidemic, as we said, in 2016 with the frozen strawberries, but, thankfully these things are less frequent. Parasites, again, would be less common still, and we see this more in people that are travelers to endemic areas.
That's kind of reassuring, I suppose, at least from the parasite perspective. So you were saying that in this area in particular, or you've seen in the hospital, that norovirus is the most common?
So if we're looking at it from a epidemiological perspective, would say that there's probably about 48 million cases of foodborne illness or gastroenteritis in the American population each year. Of that, there's probably about 120,000 cases that actually make it to the hospital. And when it comes to coming to the hospital, that's when we're more likely to see some of these cases, because usual viral gastroenteritis, the 90% of them won't turn up to the hospital because they're usually self-limiting. People can manage the symptoms and they'll get better within the week.
Yeah, so that's pretty reassuring for most people,
Yeah.
Having to not have to, they can manage it at home, which we will be going over in a future slide. So we're not epidemiologists, so we're going to keep this brief and to the point. Thank you so much, Dr. Stramanka, for the very detailed and brief descriptions. So in the case of the foodborne pathogens, there are a few common food safety mistakes that we'll go into detail about as well, because if it's already contaminated, there are some things you can do to avoid getting that contamination within your system and within your living area. One of the first things is that I'm sure everybody's heard of already is not washing hands. Dr. Stramanka, you want to go into detail about this one?
I mean, I think that's the most common thing, really. Even within the hospital environment as well, we try to minimize the spread of infections by washing hands, because we tend not to think about it very much. But, your day-to-day life, when you touch something, when you handle money has been handled by hundreds, thousands, millions of people, and you don't know what's touched it last. So you touch that, you touch your hands, you touch other people, you touch the doorknobs, in your house. And then when it comes to touching food, if you haven't had a chance to wash your hands before that, it adds to the spread.
And then we have both the washing of fruits and vegetables and the washing of meat, chicken, turkey. That's chicken or turkey, but you do wash and peel fruits and vegetables beforehand. So can you give us insight as to why one is okay, but the meat one is not?
Sure. So when we're washing meat, what tends to happen is a lot of meat will carry bacteria. All living things carry bacteria on them. When we cook meat, we tend to kill a lot of the bacteria if we're heating it to high temperatures. But what we find is that when people wash meat, the splashing and the splattering as well ends up inadvertently cross-contaminating other areas. So if that splashed you wash the meat and it splashes onto the countertops or the work surfaces, then other things will touch it and pick up the bacteria. Fruits and vegetables are sort of different situations. So we tend to think of fruits like bananas, for example, the fruit's on the inside. And so when we peel it, we're entering a sort of untouched area. But again, what happens is if we haven't washed the surface of the banana peel, then when we peel it, we inadvertently transfer bacteria from the outside to the inside.
Very, very important. I have a feeling most people are aware that you don't wash meat, chicken, or turkey. I'm sure that's like a thing that everybody grew up knowing not to do, but it's important to know why. So glad to hear it. Another thing that I'm sure people are familiar with from childhood is the eating of raw batter or dough. I remember doing this or seeing my friends eat raw cookie dough straight from the little package. And other foods like uncooked egg or uncooked flour. Tell us a little bit why that's also not a great idea.
So similarly, when we're eating the raw batter, it's the raw egg inside it that, it hasn't been cooked. The bacteria that might be sitting there as well, potential for salmonella infections and other infections is there. Even though it is a fun pastime, you just need one opportunity to be unlucky to become quite unwell with it.
Exactly, especially since the children who are eating it are among the high risk population for food poisoning, correct?
Sure.
Mm-hmm. And then we have the last two that are sort of similar, the thawing or marinating of food on the counter and leaving food out for too long. When we talk about leftovers, that's what we sort of mean. I remember always, like, my mother would be at work and I'd be at home. She'd be like, oh, make sure that the salmon or the chicken is out of the freezer so that when I have come home for dinner, I can just start cooking it. So not a good idea, Dr. Shermanker, or...
Well, again, it's the leaving things out. I mean, it makes sense that to thaw things so that it reaches a temperature that you're able to cook it. But what we find is that when you leave things out for any length of time, there's a sweet spot for bacteria to grow, which is somewhere between 40 degrees Fahrenheit to 140 degrees Fahrenheit. And it's that environment that they sort of proliferate and grow in that can cause problems.
Yeah, the main thing, I guess, that binds all these food safety mistakes is that we're leaving that bacteria to multiply.
Right.
So, and just have more chances for us to ingest it and unfortunately get sick from it. So I think that's the common thing that binds all these food safety mistakes, and it's just good for us to be aware of them. And the CDC has outlined 4 steps that are similar that kind of help you overcome or remember how to avoid those common mistakes. So Dr. Stramanka, feel free to jump in and go into detail about any one of these steps. But the first step is clean, the washing of hands, kitchen surfaces, utensils, and fruits and vegetables. And it should be done before, during, and after preparing food.
And cleaning, when we talk about cleaning our hands as well, it's not just rinsing things underwater, which might wash away some things, but it doesn't necessarily cleanse the surface. What they recommend using is hot soapy water to clean surfaces and to clean your hands.
Yeah, and would something like Clorox wipes on counter and surfaces be all right?
So you can use those, but obviously be careful about using food on those surfaces straight after as well. Remember that these chemicals as well are not things that we should be ingesting either.
Good point, good point. And then the next step after clean is the separation, and specifically the separation of, something like cutting boards that you use for the meats and the vegetables. So there is no cross-contamination of those bacterias in each of them. And it also refers to what we keep in the fridge. So in your fridge, you want to have a separate compartment for your vegetables, and your raw meats should probably be in the freezer, I believe. Yes. Yeah, so obviously, unless I think in terms of the defrosting, you want to as opposed to leaving it on the counter, you can take the raw meat out of the freezer and just defrost it straight in the fridge.
In the fridge, that's right.
What I understand. Yep. So that's what we mean by separate. You don't want to put your defrosting meat next to your vegetables. Next, we have cook, and that you safely cook your food at an internal temperature that is high enough to kill the germs. The thermometer is the most accurate way to determine whether it has killed the germs as opposed to texture or color. And I have linked a safe minimum cooking temperatures chart on here. So if you do have a thermometer, you can refer to this chart and see how high the temperature should be for certain foods. Dr. Stramanka, I know a lot of people tend to forego the thermometer and tend to just check and slice the meat to see if it's pink on the inside, to check if it's okay to eat. Do you think the thermometer is essential for every cook?
I think realistically, a lot of people are lucky a lot of the time.
Mhm.
When we're cooking these things, we tend to have a feel for when something is cooked and not. But nothing is going to be more accurate than the thermometer when you're testing these things, because texture and color can be misleading, and it just takes one opportunity to be wrong to become seriously unwell from these things. So I'll definitely recommend using a thermometer.
Yep, so you have it from the experts. We should all invest in a thermometer. And then last step from the CDC is the chill. So CSCC, if that's the acronym that helps you remember, to refrigerate perishable foods within 2 hours and thaw foods safely in cold water in the microwave or in the fridge, as we mentioned earlier. Anything to add to that step?
Yeah, I think it's important to remember that when we're chilling foods, the idea is it doesn't kill the bacteria, but what it does do is it slows the growth of them down. And that's why we put things in the refrigerator or the freezer as well. It preserves it for longer because it prevents the bacteria from growing.
Yeah, because at that point, if you're not leaving it to chill, then the fungus and the mold will start appearing,
Yeah,
correct?
eventually it will come.
So these are the 4 steps of food safety. And I do have another chart on here, the cold food storage chart. If you have a refrigerator that regulates the temperature, like with the knob on the inside, you can be able to refer to this chart and see how much you should be having this temperature at for chilling and not just cooking.
And remember that sweet spot that I was talking about for bacteria to grow is between 40 degrees Fahrenheit to 140. So that your refrigerator should be at least less than 40.
Okay, good point. All right, and now we're moving on to what I think most people can really appreciate knowing. Food safety tips while dining out, traveling, or ordering delivery. People should first refer to this chart over here. I'm sure it's very familiar. This is from New York City. Most restaurants are required, by the Department of Health to label their restaurants with a sanitary inspection grade. It's different for every place. For instance, in Greenwich, it's not ABC, it's 1 through 10, for instance, 10 being the cleanest. So in order to, before you go out to dine, before you pick a place to travel to, or to order delivery from, always check the inspection scores or reviews that can be found either on Yelp, on the Department of Health websites, and specifically for Greenwich Time always releases a really good expose on the scores that it gives for restaurants in the area. And it goes into detail about why those scores were given. For instance, the score could be lower for the sanitary conditions of the actual establishment, of the reviews given by people who have been to this establishment, and etc. So it's good to check in with that. If the food itself, when you receive it, does not look fresh or properly cooked, you are able to send it back, make a complaint, make a review yourself of it, just so to make other people aware. And avoiding lukewarm food is really important. And Dr. Stramanka, maybe you can give more detail as to why.
Yeah, it's similar, I guess, to what we were talking about that sweet spot for bacteria to grow between 40 and 140. So lukewarm environment means that bacteria are more likely to grow. So if we get a takeaway of something, there are certain foods like rice, for example. It's very unlikely that a restaurant would be making an individual pot of rice per person that's requesting it. More likely they'll have a great vat of it, and it might stay in a lukewarm environment as well to prevent it from cooking further. But it also means that bacteria is more likely to develop. So it might be fine on the day, but I wouldn't be keeping rice that you've got from the restaurant for days on end.
Exactly. And this goes for most leftovers that you might have after getting delivery. To refrigerate leftovers quickly and eat within 3 to 4 days is the recommendation from the CDC. But I think Dr. Stramanka, for certain foods, it might even be less, correct?
Yeah, I think, the rice was an example, but even things like potato products, if they're salads, anytime where something hasn't been cooked to a high temperature that you're going to be fairly well assured that bacteria have been killed in the process of the cooking, I tend to avoid after a couple of days. Yeah.
as we mentioned in the previous slide, keeping it in the fridge does not eliminate the bacteria, it just stuns it. So that's a really important note to make. So definitely don't keep those for leftovers for over a week.
Yeah.
So that's why it's important to have during your meal prep day, for instance, you can also make that your fridge clean out day, just to make sure you don't have anything left over in there. So we're
Sorry,
not.
just a note, Veronica, as
I'm
well, on
sorry.
the meal prep as well. In this time of COVID as well, a lot of people have started to get meals, or at least ingredients, delivered to their door. And this
Yes.
has been great for all of us, prevents you from having to go out at times. But one of the risks that are inherently involved in this is we need to make sure that we're there to collect it, because if it's warm and humid temperature outside, and then these ingredients or groceries are sitting outside or on the porch for any length of time, it again increases the risk that bacteria will grow on it and it will spoil.
Yes, that I am bombarded constantly with, subscriptions to delivery services such as HelloFresh.
Yeah.
That's the only one I remember off the top of my head. But I recall that if you do not set aside the correct date on which for it to arrive, or what time it is, it could be on your porch for, hours.
Yeah.
So it's and that's at that point, even if they cover their products with, some kind of plastic or some kind of ice encased in it, it probably isn't a good idea to really even touch it. So and what about do you have any recommendations or suggestions for knowing whether the establishment itself may not be sanitary just from the outset?
I mean, I think when you've walked into a place and you can see that there's evidence that, I don't know, for example, that the seats are sticky or the tables are not clean, you've got a fairly good, you can make an assumption that probably the sanitation elsewhere is also not great. So I tend to avoid those places. But sometimes it can be misleading. And I think that these reviews are usually a good place to start the inspection and grading.
Yeah. So, you might have a favorite restaurant. You might have experience with a restaurant that wasn't ideal. You got to make that. I think the best way to go forward is to make that public if you can, and to just hear what other people say. So for the sources of food outbreak and illness, we've been talking about what individuals such as ourselves can do to keep ourselves safe. But I think it's important to be aware that, food outbreaks and illnesses can start, or the cross-contamination that creates them can start from anywhere on the food production chain. And this is a very helpful infographic that I got from the CDC. The bacteria can start from the production phase, the harvesting of the actual food or the meat. It can start during the distribution and processing, if the workers are not, washing their own hands or, handling the meat in an unsanitary way, it can start there. It can even start from the restaurant or the retail store. So it cuts, sometimes no matter what we do, we might end up becoming sick because it can start from any part in the production chain. So I just wanted to let everybody in the audience know that there is a way to view on the food safety website a list of the foodborne outbreak investigations that are going on in your state or other states. And it actually tells you exactly what bacteria was found or pathogen was found in it, and what specific product was creating that illness. So, and if you are yourself subject to a foodborne illness, become part of that statistic, you're able to actually call the CDC and report it yourself, and also be able to see locally on your health department's website foodborne outbreak investigations. For instance, in Connecticut, I have this linked right here. So you are able to report it yourself. Anything to add, Dr. Stramanka?
Not on this side, thank you.
Yeah. So yeah, this is just for you to be aware of. If you do have, no matter what you do for food safety, if you still end up with an illness, this is where you can see ahead of time and be aware of what products to avoid. Or if you unfortunately did not have a chance to avoid it, you know where to report it. So we have another question for the audience. This time it's an active poll multiple choice question. we talked earlier that there are different levels. There's a level that's manageable of severe food poisoning, and then there's severe food poisoning. And when I mean severe, it's something that you need to be hospitalized for. You need to go to the hospital straight away. If you would like to join in on this interactive portion, all you have to do is go to the camera on your phone. If you have your phone on you, you can go to your video or camera setting. You can scan the code that's on the left-hand side and click the link that comes up, and you can answer this on your phone. So I'm right on it right now. So I can click the option that I think is correct. So someone has already put down 100%. Okay. So if somebody doesn't want to answer it that way, you can also answer in the Zoom chat. Like I said before, that's your second option. So it seems to be that all of the above is the answer. The above options are bloody diarrhea, high fever, frequent vomiting. So far one person has participated. So that's why it says 100%. So if anybody else wants to contribute, do you think it's all of the above? Is it bloody diarrhea? Is it high fever, frequent vomiting? Those are the symptoms. Do you think it's all of it? Do you think it's just one of these? Give it your best shot at your answer. I don't know if Dr. Stramanka should be in this one, because that might be cheating, because he probably already knows this. If anybody wants to put in their option. Okay, we have 2 participants so far. Again, if you are confused about how to answer this poll, and I understand it's new to some people, you can answer in the Zoom chat as well at the bottom of your dashboard. Yeah, so all you have I know this is like a new thing that I'm trying out, and I appreciate anybody who's trying to interact with this. So I'm just going to give it another minute, see if anybody else wants to participate. All the above or these 3 symptoms for qualify as severe food poisoning, for which you should be hospitalized. Okay. And this is, as opposed to something that you could be able to manage at home, this is something that requires you to actually be admitted to the hospital. Otherwise, it could be fatal, especially for some of the at-risk people that we will be discussing in the next slide. So just give everybody another minute. Oh, and I'm happy to see we have 10 participants. I'm just looking into the amount of people that have joined us. Thank you so much for joining us. I appreciate everybody's interest in this. And maybe in the feedback survey, you can tell me what kind of engagement questions would be more interesting for you to engage in next time. I'm starting these. This is kind of a new thing for me to engage people with. So I appreciate the feedback if anybody has it. So we're going to move on from this interactive portion. For the 2 people that answered this question, congratulations, you are correct. All of the above, these are the symptoms of severe food poisoning that would require you to go to the hospital and get treated for, as opposed to something that would require, at-home management. So that leads us to the next slide, recognizing the symptoms of food poisoning. CDC has given us a great infographic. As you can see, those are the options from the multiple choice. Bloody diarrhea, fever higher than 102 degrees Fahrenheit, frequent vomiting, dehydration, and diarrhea for more than 3 days. And we've said before that people at higher risk for food poisoning include pregnant women and adults 65 or older, but the category also extends to children less than 5 years old and people with weakened immune systems. And I'm gonna let Dr. Stramanka take over the diagnosis and treatment section.
Sure. So, as mentioned, these are some of the signs of severe food poisoning, and you don't need to have all of these signs in order to be seen by a physician or come to the hospital. I think when it gets to this stage, sometimes it may not be in that category where we think it's a viral infection. There might be a bacterial infection or something else going on as well, where it needs to be further evaluated. It's important to know as well that having all these symptoms as a constellation doesn't necessarily mean that there's food poisoning. There might be other bowel pathologies going on, and that's why it's important that you come to a hospital so you can be evaluated. But usually what would happen when you came in is someone would take a history from you to figure out what's been going on. And a lot of the time when we see that people have been having takeaways, or they've gone to a conference, or gone to a barbecue and eaten something. They might have returned from travel, but it just helps us to gauge what might be the cause. And taking a note of your symptoms is pretty important, actually. When things started, whether it was diarrhea or vomiting or both, whether there's blood, whether there's fever. What people tend to get really unwell with is, apart from feeling unwell with the fevers, and they might have some abdominal discomfort, they tend to become very dehydrated. And that's because the fevers, especially if you're running at 102 or more, you'll be sweating a lot and you sort of lose fluid that way, but also through the diarrhea and the vomiting as well. You're constantly losing volume and also electrolytes, the potassium, the sodium, and you're not being able to replete it enough. We try to encourage people to increase their fluid intake and to get on top of it. But if you find yourself becoming dehydrated that you're not able to manage, it might be that you need further treatment. So after we've seen you, we'd examine you, we'd probably do some blood tests as well. And sometimes it tells us whether your electrolytes are within a normal range. It might tell us whether, because of severe dehydration, your kidney function has been affected. It might tell us that your infection markers are elevated. At this point, if you have been having very frequent loose stools, we'd probably take a sample of it and send it to our labs to see if there are any bacteria that grow. Often our testing is negative, but occasionally we do come back having grown particular bugs that may or may not require antibiotic treatment. But certainly if you end up requiring an admission or turning up to the hospital, we'd probably give you intravenous fluids as well, until we're satisfied that you're able to maintain that oral intake to combat this until it resolves.
So very, very thorough explanation, by the way. I'm sure people will really appreciate that if they have to come to the hospital. So you mentioned coming in, being admitted, being evaluated. Is this something, depending on the severity, would this be something that they have to be kept overnight for? Do they have to prepare some kind of like bag with them, or can they foresee themselves coming home the same night?
Sure. I think these things are a case by case. And I think at any point, if you are needing to go to the hospital because you're not sure what's going on or you're feeling really not very well, I think it's probably wise to take things with you with the preparation for the expectation that you probably won't be coming back the same day. You might very well be. They might say, everything's within normal limits and we're satisfied that you're able to take fluids yourself and we'll send you back home. But in the event that you're not, it's better to be prepared.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So basically, I guess it seems like be prepared for anything. Bring an extra change of clothes, bring your toothbrush, whatever. Just be prepared for anything, essentially. That's a good point. And I forgot this. Sometimes the use of antibiotics may be required, as you so eloquently put it.
One thing I wanted to add as well, when it comes to infective diarrhea, we find that a lot of people would like to take things like Imodium, which is the paramide, things to try and slow down the fluid from being lost. And whilst it might help with the symptoms, how it ends up happening is the bacteria or the viruses are not being shed. You keep it in the body and actually you prolong your course of having the illness. So using it is not advised either until it's prescribed by a doctor.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and people are going to be definitely going to be wanting to do managing at home with those kind of medications. But yes, in this case, seeing an actual medical health professional would be better. But that brings us to our next slide. If it is not as severe as those symptoms, there is a way to manage it from home, and we're going to go into detail with that. We're specifically going to be talking about gastroenteritis again, or the stomach flu. And I'll let Dr. Stramanka take that away, as it is his specialty.
Sure. So I won't go into the symptoms again, because I think we've exhausted that already. But, as I mentioned, it's mainly about keeping up your hydration because of the loss of fluids and electrolytes from diarrhea and vomiting. Water is always a great way, but even things like Gatorades or other energy drinks as well, they'll contain sugars and salts and some electrolytes as well that helps you to replete your body's losses. When it comes to eating, we always say blander foods, nothing that's too exciting for the stomach or the bowel to handle, and things that are very spicy or particularly oily foods, because they're not being absorbed as well, and they can sometimes cause inflammation for themselves. If anyone's ever had a very spicy meal and they had a stomachache afterwards, this is adding to the insult. Dairy products in particular are not really advised when you're having diarrhea-like symptoms as well, because they tend to worsen the symptoms. So would avoid that for the time being. But dry foods, bland foods are usually okay.
One of the questions that I actually had for you is gastroenteritis contagious? Like, should you not be around other people when you're experiencing a stomach flu?
So because about 90% of them are viral things are often very contagious, yes. And we tend to say that people can be contagious for up to 2 weeks after their diarrhea has stopped. Usually after about 48 hours of the diarrhea stopping, we have less of that spread, but it's an important thing to remember because it is contagious. And that brings us back to washing hands and making sure that our surfaces are clean to prevent the spread of bacteria and viruses.
So for up to 2 weeks, that's important for people to remember. Yep, we don't want to, nobody wants to be the epicenter for another foodborne outbreak. So definitely keep that in mind. Anything else to add before we continue?
No.
Okay, good. Because besides getting plenty of rest, I forgot to add that bullet point in there. If you don't have anything to add, we're going to proceed to our 5-minute intermission, as I kept pointing out to people. So this is the time when you can stretch, go get a drink of water, use the restroom. And I have a timer up here that I will put up on the screen so that we know when to come back. So I'm just going to start the timer right here. So be back in 5 minutes, everybody. I'm going to turn off my video for a second. So enjoy. I'm going to put up some more music. Hopefully you guys like it. Okay, we're just about at 15 seconds. I hope everybody made use of this intermission, and it looks like we didn't lose everyone, so that's a good thing. I'm glad everybody stuck around. All right, so we're gonna turn off this timer and go back to the presentation. We have about with this last section won't take too long, and we'll just have about 5 minutes left for the Q&A. So thank you everybody for sticking around. I hope we all had a good intermission and Zoom break. We're just arriving back in time for another question for the audience. This one's going to be a lot easier. Some of you will definitely know the answer to this. I have another Padlet set up for people who want to give that a try, or you can answer in the Zoom chat, but this one's going to be easier. What is your favorite recipe to make for the holidays, and where do you search for new recipes? Perhaps you get it from a friend, maybe you go on the internet. I like to get a sense of what everybody goes to look for this stuff, and feel free to add in your input, Dr. Stramanka. I'm curious as to know whether you get
I'm
any
taking note for myself.
Really? Oh, is there no like kind of family thing? Maybe, passed down from, generations past or something like that?
No, they're very protective about their recipes. They don't want me running off with them and making it for myself.
Not even from family?
Not even
Wow.
family.
That's cold. So I'm gonna open the Padlet up for anybody who wants to give that a try. I have it, this is the old one. I'm gonna put up the other one. So this is where you can go to put in your Padlet for favorite recipe to make for the holidays. So let me add mine in. For instance, did I share it? Yeah, let me share it. You guys are gonna have a hard time posting in here if I don't share the link. My apologies. So this is the link for the Padlet if you want to add in your answer, or if you want to just go in the Zoom chat box and put it in yourself, you can do that too. My favorite recipe to make for the holiday is, this is really basic, but apple pie. Just a typical baked good. I usually search actually on the American Heart Association. That's where I search. For not just the recipe, but they also offer a lot of low sodium, healthy alternatives to classic recipes such as this. So that's my response, for instance, apple pie. And I like to search online on certain websites for them. And I will be sharing those in a moment with you, for those of you who may not know. But if anybody wants to contribute their response, I kind of hoping for ideas from the audience too, in case I want to try something new. Anybody do anything classic too for the holidays? I know the only holiday that's really coming up is Halloween, but then we also have Thanksgiving coming up soon. So people might want to interject about that if people are willing. I'm thinking what else is really typical for Thanksgiving? Cakes and cookies. Okay, for the family recipes for cakes and cookies, somebody mentioned that. Cookbooks, okay. Yeah, that's a typical place to search for new recipes. There's so many out there. And in fact, I will be showing what's available in my collection at the Consumer Health Library that people are able to check out, actually. We set up a, borrowing system here. If anybody wants to check out one of the cookbooks here, yep, I'll have my email at the end of this presentation. So I think we're going to go ahead. Thank you for sharing that response. And we're just going to move forward to the last bit of the presentation, which is the online resources. So places to find recipes. I recommend choosemyplate.gov, really great recipes on there. Foodhero.org is really great because it not only I chose these websites specifically because they all provide really easy to find categories. If you're searching for low sodium, there's a category for that. If you're searching for, more protein based, there's a section for that. And specifically for kids, if you want to involve kids in the cooking process, because that can be a really fun activity for them, Nemours Kids Health is a really great site for easy recipes for kids to make themselves. And they even have a category in there for allergens, so if you have a child who has a lot of specific allergies, they have recipes for that child. And of course, we mentioned before foodsafety.gov. The CDC food safety page is where you would go to investigate foodborne illnesses and products that you need to avoid. I'm just going to highlight specifically this link because there's a really cool feature on it. Actually, I think I actually have it up on here. No, that's not it. Yeah, so this one. So if you go to the foodsafety.gov website, there's something called the Food Keeper app. And that's something I want to make you all familiar about because it's a really easy way to look up how long you can keep foods. It helps you understand food and beverages storage. So for instance, if you go to meat, which we've said is a really common food for foodborne illnesses to be in, you can look up fresh, smoked or processed. We'll go to fresh. So for instance, if you're looking at how long you can keep beef ground, it'll show you for freshness and quantity, this item should be consumed within 1 to 2 days if refrigerated from date of purchase, or if frozen, it can last for 3 to 4 months. So I think this is a really unique way for consumers to just easily just go on their phone or go on this website and just look up whatever product you have, and so you'll be able to know exactly how long to keep it in storage for. Are you aware about this resource, Dr. Stramanka?
I wasn't. I was actually just writing it down. I thought that was really useful.
Oh, good. Yeah. It's for free in the App Store for both Android and iPhone users. So and if you don't have a phone with good access to the internet, you can go on your computer at your local library and be able to just go on the foodsafety.gov website and go to the Keep Food Safe section. And then the last section is where you'll find the Food Keeper app. So you can just have access to it from there.
Do you know if there's any cost to the app, or is it free to download?
It's free. It's free to download because it was an app developed by the USDA. So it's not for profit, and it's also not going to keep any of your data like some of the other apps. It's not going to track you or anything. So that's one of the great benefits of it. And then I'm going to selfishly push my own resource that I manage. This is the Dr. Stephen Mika Community Health Resource section. If you click on this link right here, it'll take you to my previous webinar recordings that I've done, but we also have a whole section on food and nutrition and food safety. I've also had previous webinars that deal with different aspects of nutrition, such as healthy holiday eating, family resources for nutrition and exercise, and food for 50. If you click on these links, they will take you to a YouTube playlist that is set up specifically for the medical library. So that's also just resources involving nutrition that you can look up in your own time. And I mentioned that I have a whole print collection. This is literally a picture I took from my section labeled Cookbooks and Nutrition. As you can see, we have the Complete Mediterranean Diet Cookbook, diabetes cookbooks, the allergy-free easy cooking, Wellness Mama, the China Study, all of like the great cookbooks have been really well reviewed and also co-written with nutritionists and dietitians in mind. And I also have 2 recommendations here specific to food safety. The FDA has provided a free PDF called the Big Bad Bug Book. We talked about pathogens very briefly earlier on, but if you want a more in-depth look at all the pathogens that are common with foodborne illnesses, that's where you go. It's completely free. And then we have Phyllis Entis published a book just last year called Tainted, From Farm Gate to Dinner Plate, 50 Years of Food Safety Failures. Great overview, very recent, and it helps us get a better sense of that food production chain that we talked about. So with that, we have our Q&A section right now. I know we went a little bit over time, but we're exactly at 7. I appreciate everybody for coming and attending, and I know Tushar Shermanker. So thank you so much for joining. If there are any questions for us, please ask now. You can do so in the chat box and the bottom of your screen, or in the Q&A box that's also on the bottom of your dash screen. Mark, did we allow people to type? Yes. we allowed for people to type in the boxes as a response for the Q&A.
So the Q&A is one thing, and are you referring to the chat?
Yeah, so like the chat, like I just want to be able to make sure that these people were able, our audience members were able to type their questions if they wanted to. Sorry, it's a little connection issue. But yeah, I'm assuming that you're able to type in your questions if you want, because you were responding in the chat at some points. So yeah, if anybody has any questions.
So the Q&A, sorry, the Q&A is open.
Okay, great. So you'll be able to ask us questions from the Q&A box. I see we still have 8 participants here. So if any of you have any questions for Dr. Stramanka or myself, please ask. This is your chance. And while you guys are writing your questions, I just want you to know that I have another webinar coming up next Tuesday, same time for 1 hour. This is going to be on prostate health updates. And for those of you who know somebody to send this webinar to, there is going to be on my website, the same website that I mentioned earlier, there's going to be a webinar archive page. This recording for this webinar is going to be available in a day or so. So you'll be able to share this with anyone who missed the live session. We have one question. Someone was asking, is it for when it comes to microwaving food? Maybe Dr. Stramanka can add to this. How do you peel peaches is a good question. Whenever I don't know how to peel fruit, I always use a YouTube video.
Heating up food. Microwave is fine for a lot of foods. There's some that we need to be careful about that have a high water content. So for example, scrambled eggs, sticking that in the microwave, I don't think many people do that, but if you were to do that, they retain the heat, but sometimes what we have is that it splatters as well. And I've actually seen people that have had burns as related to that. So we have to be careful about microwaving things too. But as to answer your question about how long to heat it, it really depends on what you are cooking. The idea would be to heat it for a certain amount of times, whether it's 2 minutes and to wait. Once you have taken it out of the microwave, I would stir it, and then what you try to do is test the temperature of the center of it. So if you stir it, you'll be able to get to the deepest parts of it, the ones that would be least likely to heat up. And when that is hot and it's letting off steam, you've reached the right temperature.
Yeah.
With regards to the peach, I haven't peeled a peach before, and I'm not aware that you need to. I think you can wash it thoroughly though from the outside.
Yeah. So I wanted to make sure that I was correct. So I'm glad that you concur. But that's a really good point about the microwaving. I think also a part of the question was, how long to microwave to avoid, to maybe kill the bacteria on certain dishes. But I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
Yeah, so that's what I was saying. So when it comes to microwaving it, we need to make sure that it's hot enough. So we would be looking to microwave it as long as it takes for the food to steam.
So it has to be steaming. So that's a good indicator that it was long enough to microwave in. Okay, good. Very good question. I appreciate you asking. Anybody else have a question? We still have time on our hands. I don't want to keep Dr. Stramanka for too long, but we'll give it like another 2 minutes and we'll see if anybody has questions. And while people are typing, I'm just going to quickly show how to get to the website, because I just want to make sure people know how to find these webinar archives that I set up. So this is what my website looks like. If you type in this Dr. Stephen Mickley Community Health Resource section, that's pretty long, I understand, but it will be worth it because we have a lot of great resources you can see. And this is this category for webinar recordings. As you can see, I've done a lot of webinars since last year, so maybe there's something in here that you're interested in. You will also be able to see a full list of my upcoming webinars in September and October here in the link. And then I will most likely be posting this recording for this webinar in the nutrition and exercise section among all the other ones I've done in the past. So It's your playground. Definitely look, see in what interests you. And if you want to register for an upcoming webinar, please visit Greenwich Hospital's classes and events page or call this number here. And I also have that information listed right here in this PowerPoint for you to be aware of. Okay, so I think, yep, so I have my library contact information for anybody who wants to know more. And to reach out to me for this content or any other health information that you might need to know about. And I don't think there are any other questions so far. I have not received any more questions. I think that's a good sign, though. Dr. Stramanka is very eloquent, he's very knowledgeable, and he is clearly webinar guest speaker material. So I just want to say thank you so much before we go again for joining.
No, thank you very much for hosting, organizing, writing this as well. It's been
yeah,
great.
It's quite an endeavor, but yeah, you've made it all the more easier, honestly. So with that, I think we're going to conclude for the evening. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining. And I look forward to seeing you in future webinars, one of which will be of next week. So please tune in and have a great night.